But I think the biggest thing that you can also give is like a knowledge transfer. That's one of the greatest things that you can ever give somebody. And so I felt like that was the necessary need that I needed to do, which was give a knowledge transfer of all the information I have, which ultimately inspired me to start From the Culture, which was seeing the same problems that, other founders experience that look like me, that look like you, that they experience, literally trying to get their ideas into the ether, AKA the market, and validate it. And ultimately they just need that human capital boost. And so created a firm in which that we do that. And then here we are, 13 companies later in our portfolio, and boom, here we are.
Welcome to the Innovation Blueprint, the podcast where we explore the latest in business, technology, and industry transformation. I'm Haresh Singhani, and in each episode, we dive into the strategies, challenges, and innovations reshaping our industries. Join thought leaders and experts as they discuss how innovation and technology, from AI to sustainability, drive growth and change. Morning, Mark.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I know we've been talking about this for a while, so I'm super excited we could, take the time to have you on the podcast. I hope all's well. We had a big storm in Seattle.
We did, but we were okay on our side of the city, so no power outages, no nothing.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, we're on the east side.
Yeah, how are you guys doing over there? You guys had trees go?
I think everybody's, I believe most people are back with the power. We lost it for about a day.
Okay.
Not too bad, but there were some friends. I think the worst story I heard was 4 nights.
Yeah, I have friends that live in Lake Sammamish, and they got hit pretty hard. So it was just like, we're going to have to abandon the fort for a few days.
Yeah, now we're back and kind of gearing up for Thanksgiving and so on. I've been on the podcast journey for a little bit over a year, maybe a year and a half now. And the idea is to talk to interesting people who are doing interesting things and share stories and ultimately, inspire others and also be inspired ourselves, right? That's kind of the idea behind this series of podcasts. And so very excited to have you. I know we got a chance to get acquainted only this year.
Yep.
Through your massive summer effort.
The summit.
Yeah, the summit was wonderful, by the way. I hope the planning for the next one, I'm excited to.
It's now underway. It's now gotten underway. So a lot's been happening. A lot was birthed out of that event. So I'm really excited to see what happens in Summit Part 2.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit, Mark, about kind of your journey.
Yeah.
Start wherever you wish and, where you are and what's exciting now.
Let's take it all the way to, let's say, 2007, by way of, growing up in a household in which that investing was very huge. Entrepreneurship was very huge. So then let's fast forward to 2007. I'm sitting in not my college dorm because I had moved off campus at Tuskegee University in Alabama. I was sitting there and I'm like, wow, my trading journey is doing so well. I literally just wrote a full check for a full year's worth of tuition. And I'm just literally sitting there and asking myself, why am I here? What? It's like that clarity just hit. I just wrote a full year's worth of tuition check that I'm probably not going to get a refund for. Well, why am I still here? And so 2 weeks later, I dropped out of college and went on about my journey, trying to figure out exactly where did I fit in. Then I got a call after taking a few detours in a few industries like the fashion industry and stuff like that. I stepped into slight entrepreneurship, which was helping a civil engineering firm get up off the ground and helping it build here locally. So it brought me back to Seattle. The financial crisis hit. We were at the birth of the financial crisis while starting a firm. And it was a lot. It was a lot of pressure. We made it through that successfully. We were one of maybe 10 firms that survived. 10 small firms that survived out of the 30 firms that were there in existence. And then ultimately we survived through it and thrived as well. And then during that, I kind of had this existential crisis a little bit where I kind of look back towards a lot of my friends that were in college. And I'm like, these folks were very astute, very studious, sometimes even smarter than I was. And I was like, why are they not getting jobs? What's going on? And so the entrepreneurship bug came right back. And I kind of find that you don't go find entrepreneurship, it finds you. And so it was a problem that I felt like I needed to explore and I needed to solve. So built a recruitment platform that literally focused on validation of skills and, struggled through that journey, struggled raising capital, then also like came to the end where it was time for a successful exit. And I didn't want to sell, but I sold.
Yep.
And then I got into venture capital after that, thinking that, hey, given that all the struggles that I experienced as a Black founder, I don't want to see that same problem happen to the next generation of founders that walk behind me, that are coming behind me. I did that for about 4.5, 5 years. Liked it, but more so hated it because of the fact that you hear a lot of great ideas, you're investing in it, but you're not helping build it. So it didn't really land for me. I said, okay, hey, well, what is it that I can do different? Around the same time that I was like stepping away, the pandemic had hit. Like my mindset was building to step away from venture capital and the pandemic had hit. And over that period of time, I would slightly like mentor folks that wanted to know more about publicly traded markets and trading and investing. And it just so happened that my co-host, Jolene, was one of the folks that I mentored. And next thing you know, she posted on her Facebook page right before the pandemic. This was beginning of 2020. She posted, and then next thing you know, my messages are flooded and everything else. Hey, can you teach me? Can you teach me? Can you teach me? And I'm like, oh, great. All right. That's not the plan. But, I always say when men make plans, God laughs. And pretty much long story short, that's how the Come Up series was birthed. And it also led me into being somebody on a philanthropic side with giving, not only just people philanthropically, of course, give their money. Some people give their time. But I think the biggest thing that you can also give is like a knowledge transfer. That's one of the greatest things that you can ever give somebody. And so I felt like that was the necessary need that I needed to do, which was give a knowledge transfer of all the information I have, which ultimately inspired me to start From the Culture, which was seeing the same problems that, other founders experience that look like me, that look like you, that they experience, literally trying to get their ideas into the ether, AKA the market, and validate it. And ultimately, they just need that human capital boost. And so created a firm in which that we do that. And then here we are, 13 companies later in our portfolio, and boom, here we are. I guess that brings you up to speed. That's who I am.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Actually, I think I knew many of the segments, of your journey, but a couple of them I didn't know before you just recounted the whole thing now.
Oh.
I don't know if it's an age thing or what, right? But at some point, we all have that urge that I wish there's a way I could be useful so that other people don't have to go through the same level of adversity or struggle that I went through. The irony also is that struggle is necessary, right? So what is the right kind of struggle and what is the unjust or unjust kind of struggle, right? And then scaling, right? It's like once you played the game for a decade or 2 or 3, and then you're like, well, how do I scale this, right?
Yep.
It's like, I can keep doing what I'm doing. I mean, I can take one person aside and tell them, but I want to see how I can actually have an influence at scale or...
Exactly.
And so I think these models of, mentorship, teaching, volunteering, being a VC, doing an incubator, but I kind of like the model that, as I understand it, From the Culture, which is almost like adopting.
Yeah. I guess that's the best way to put it, actually. Yeah.
And it's a village level adoption, right? It's not like just Mark, because Mark alone can't do it.
No, I can't. It's my entire firm, all my LPs that are also part of the process. I feel like, a Professor Xavier from X-Men.
But there you go.
The school, Xavier School for Gifted Kids. And so it's every single entrepreneur is gifted in the sense that they bring ideas that, sometimes we never thought that we could even fathom or imagine. We all know that when you've been in the startup world, all ideas start off as ugly. And then the more that you work on it, the more it starts to become more beautiful and everything else. And so I think that that's the beautiful thing about it, though. There's beauty in every single angle of the process, especially once you've seen it. There's beauty in like the ideation. There's beauty in the struggle to like push it into the market. There's beauty in the building part. There's beauty in the process when you have to raise capital and when you're like also hitting those barriers of like, okay, hey, like product market fit is struggling. There's beauty in also finding the pivots. And I think the beautiful thing about it is because of the fact that there's so much interconnection between entrepreneurship and just life itself.
Of course.
So I think that that's the beautiful part to it.
Got it. Ultimately, the people who are kind of following the entrepreneurs, right, the leaders of a corporation, etc., they've kind of outsourced that entrepreneurship thinking or part of the business to the entrepreneurs in that business.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, life is entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
Every organization, whether you're nonprofit, for-profit,
Yes,
faith-based or governmental or company, etc., there's a
you
lot
name
of
it.
right. You're trying to do something. You're trying to corral people to your vision. You're trying to refine your vision. You're trying to make a mark, hopefully make the world better in your own vision, right? And
Yeah.
most of us, thankfully, have a positive set of intentions and visions, but a few of us don't. And then I guess it's to the rest of us to try to.
But that's the beautiful part, Haresh, because like even when we have folks that have nefarious ideas and everything else, like the human spirit and ingenuity ultimately still always, we want to make things better. So
Yeah,
even
true, true.
in the sense of somebody's selfishness and whatever, society will
In
always
their
find a way to
twisted
benefit.
definition, they're still
And their
trying to do it
twisted
better.
definition.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
exactly.
and
That's true.
that's the crazy part. Like it kind of just hit me now. For me being a VC, for me being an entrepreneur, for me being, managing partner of this firm, and then also the Come Up series, and then also being a trader for 20 years. All entrepreneurship.
Yep,
All entrepreneurship. Even being a student, entrepreneurship.
absolutely.
So
So I have one question, I guess, with
yeah.
regards to kind of from the culture, which I guess it is an adoption now platform officially rechristened now, right? Tell us a little bit about the gives and gets and the filtering process as far as how people, qualify.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's certain beautiful parts that I brought in from the world of venture capital that I liked, which was I want to hear a pitch from the founders. So the way that FTC works is we're always approachable. And it's not just me that's approachable. It's also our LPs there. So essentially you can approach any of our LPs. They become a part of that filtering process too, of like understanding what our vision is. And that just like every VC firm, every firm has a thesis as it pertains to like, this is our thesis over this time horizon, over this time period. And if it fits our thesis, then okay, hey, that's the first leg. The second leg is like, okay, hey, like, the complexity of the project, the viability of the project, the founder market fit, the product market fit or service market fit. Is there an actual like area where we can truly see that this has viability and that we have the capacity that we can carry this through? When we listen to those pitches, that's ultimately how we're listening. The other part of the pitches, we want to see how much of the groundwork have you done? How much of the thought process have you put through? Like to literally see exactly like, okay, hey, well, like, how far along are you in this? Like, have you thought about like, okay, hey, like the challenges that await you? Have you thought about like, okay, hey, do you actually have a pathway towards entering into the marketplace? Once we get past that process, then the decision process is fairly quick. I mean, we run through a due diligence process that we kind of like are building our own model actually as a due diligence model. And then essentially from there, it's either a yay or nay. And then at that point, if it's a yay, then essentially we start getting through the process of, well, if the product is just at an ideation, but they've done all the necessary groundwork, let's start the design process. If they've already done the design process, but they need their product team, okay, let's bring the product team, but then let's also mentor the founders as well. If it's a no, we don't believe in leaving people off to the wayside. If anything, we say, okay, hey, though that we can't like take this on as like one of our true portco companies where we're like heavily invested right now, we'll mentor and advise for the time being. And if things change or if we're noticing that there's elemental changes that are happening, then okay, hey, then it produces a pathway into FTC. So we have like about 14 companies within our portfolio, but then there's like probably like 100 startups that we probably like advise.
Got it. One of the challenges, right, is that there's the inclusivity and the exclusivity, right? When you're investing, especially other people's money, LP's money, et cetera, you have a strong responsibility to make sure that you're investing in the best possible opportunities.
And at the same time, the empathy side and just the give back side, you want to help every entrepreneur that's out there, right? But you can't do that with other people's money. Of course, if you had money and you wanted to give your own money, you could do whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
So I think this is something that I've kind of, I guess, thought about and also asked people about. It's like, how do you balance that inclusivity and exclusivity? And you're saying that even when you're working with an entrepreneur or founding team, and if they're not ready for you to take investment or for you to invest the LP resources and your firm's resources, the mentorship's always available, right?
Yeah.
You're available as a team, as a resource to say, okay, how can we help you get better? And I think that's great. And then sometimes maybe some of those people will eventually be successful in what they're doing, or they'll just be probably more successful people in somewhere else, maybe not the endeavor that they started with, right?
Yeah, the impacts are huge, Haresh, because even though like we've had companies that have gone on to raise capital and, do some pretty cool things with the capital that they've raised, we didn't take it on as a portfolio company. One, because and it's for a multitude of reasons. It could be just that, one, we just don't have the capacity to take on this project right now, or it's just out of scope for us. But it doesn't mean that the business itself is non-viable. And, one of the things that we always tell them is like, hey, like, keep in tune with us. And they definitely do that. They give us their updates. They also, like, every week I get calls or I get text messages or I get LinkedIn messages of like, hey, running through this challenge, how should I go about doing this? And it's just like, having that, being available for just those small incremental moments are just as massive as, say, for example, building a product for a founder or working with them from like ideation to MVP. Each part has this pivotal role within the ecosystem. And I think that that's what we're trying to encourage, and also try to set a new model within the startup space, which is like, it's really community focused. And if we keep people within that community focus, even if it means that it may not work out with your business, but yet at the same token, it goes beyond just like, okay, hey, the bottom line. It's more so in the sense of making the industry itself better. That's ultimately the objective.
Okay. From the culture, what year is it?
Year 2. So we're 2 years in. April of next year will mark our 3rd year.
Wow.
Yeah.
One of the things with this as a business, I suppose, is, you have to wait for a paycheck for a while, right?
Yeah.
So it's not short term.
No.
And also the founders have to be prepared, right, for the battle that could be at least several years, but maybe even longer.
Yep. We definitely enlighten them. Like, some folks kind of like think that, okay, hey, like, I'm going to have this idea, and then ultimately somebody's just going to be like, all right, I just want to buy you and I'm going to get like tons and tons of money. And I'm like, no, it might happen, but essentially that's, you don't just build a product for somebody to ultimately just come through and just acquire the company tomorrow. Companies just don't get on track like that. If that was the case, then everybody would be doing it and everybody would be ultimately successful.
No, makes sense. There was something you mentioned, I don't know where you got it, whether it was your original thought or not, at the summit in the summer. This was kind of talking to budding entrepreneurs. There was a bunch of founder sessions, and I think I was in one of them, and you mentioned that when you're looking for money, ask for advice, and when you're looking for advice, ask for money.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, how you came upon that insight or lesson.
Simple things like learning behavior, like watching, behavior of how is it that people interact. From the interactions of what I've seen, when people tend to ask for advice, then that means that essentially that they're onto something. They're literally in the process of working through and everything else. There's no expectation as it pertains to money and everything else. It's more so just in the sense of that grandiose excitement of this idea that I'm working on, that I'm literally pushing through, even if I have market validation or not. It's like the fact that I can come to you and ask you for advice. And if I'm an investor, like, it's more than just money. You're asking me more than just a paycheck or just for like a check for your company. You're asking me now for my insight because of the fact that you think that my insight is valuable or some type of validity towards my insight. And when you think about most like investors, whether VCs, CVCs, and everything else, they're more than just a check. They want to be able to provide insight. They want to be able to help their founders become successful. And so it kind of gives you an inside look as it pertains to how does that entrepreneur think? How is it that they seek advice? How is it that they're ultimately looking to grow? And when you just come to ask a person for a paycheck, or for a check for the company. I say paycheck in the sense that the company, like when you're asking for a check, it's like, okay, hey, well, there's something missing there. I tend to find whenever somebody comes and asks for money, there's always something that's missing. There's some type of massive piece that's missing from the puzzle. And so there's something that needs to be advised there. And so just sitting back and realizing like, okay, hey, look, if you ask for advice, people will want to more so invest in that because of the fact is like, okay, you're on to something. When you're asking for money, they're going to probably say no. And then they're probably going to give you advice. They're going to say, okay, hey, this, and this, these are the things that I would probably work on, or these are some of the challenges that I think that you guys probably need to, that you probably need to get past and everything else. But versus like, okay, hey, we're going through these challenges and we're literally trying to work through this. Is there any way possible that essentially that you can provide me any advice as it pertains to how is it that we get through that? Which one would you invest in?
Right. Yeah, makes sense. I think when you put it that way, I was reflecting on like my conversations with investors and advisors for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
We used to not put a lot of weight into people who said no and why they said no. But obviously you're looking for patterns. If more than one person, right, it's 3 or more, it's even better. Tell you the same thing. Maybe there's something there.
There's something.
And sometimes it's counter pattern too, right? Where these stories come out of course, after the fact. Like, 20 people said no to me, right? Before the next person said yes or whatever. And this happens to entrepreneurs, but also like...
That was me.
Yeah, exactly. Another place where this happens is filmmakers and authors that want to get published, right?
Yep.
They're like, I went to so many publishers or so many studios and nobody would fund me or help me make my film. But then it's like, what did you learn? Or how did they make you better?
Yep.
Right. And sometimes that exercise of going to 20 investors and all of them saying no probably made you better. And it probably is what it took to get you ready for that 21st one. Otherwise, if you had the 21st first, that would probably not have happened either.
Nah, it would have given me a lot of false sense of confidence.
Yeah.
And everything else. And a lot of lessons that ultimately that I didn't learn.
Actually, speaking of some of this is one of the things that's happened since roughly the Ukraine war started, right, 2 years plus ago, is that the interest rates started going up about the same time inflation went up and all this stuff. And then so the early stage, investment availability changed radically, right?
Yeah.
So what's happened is a lot of companies are kind of a limbo or trying to cross that chasm, this new chasm or chasm that they didn't anticipate or have earlier. And so High Tech Advisors, my team, we're a consulting team, right? We basically have end-to-end coverage in product, IT, and engineering. So we're not an investor, but me and some of the other key players in our team, we've been founders, we've been in VC-backed companies, we worked with investors in the past, et cetera. So, and then some of these companies that are struggling with funding happen to be our clients, have been our clients in the past. But we get hit up for investment now, more. Everybody gets hit up for investment, as you know, no matter who you are, as long as you've been around for a while.
Yep.
And some of these companies are fairly, they're significant companies with significant backers, with significant deep-pocketed, VC backers. And to me, that's always a sign, not necessarily a positive sign, that if you have deep-pocketed backers and now you're back in the market, approaching new parties with probably even smaller checks or significantly smaller checks. Right. I'm wondering if you're seeing some of that, and are there any patterns or any suggestions that you might have for both the investors or founders who are in this state?
Yeah. So I guess let's roll back the clock a little bit, because I think that we need to pull back the curtain so that way people can see the dirty secret that happens behind closed doors. And I'm glad that you mentioned interest rates went up during that time period. I think it was from 2022 to earlier this year. And then we started doing rate cuts. And so essentially we started seeing that cost of capital was getting higher. And when cost of capital gets higher, then ultimately people start to get a little bit more conservative and selective when it comes to where does their capital go. The other thing that we started to see that, the industry itself was changing, not changing, but let's just say evolving or growing up or going through a growth phase. AI companies and AI thesis was definitely a part of everybody's playbook. Whether you look from the CVC, fund of funds, family funds, and VCs, I guess you can also include angel groups in there as well. Everybody's requirements started changing. And then, of course, the SBB situation, which kind of slightly rocked the industry for a hot second there before we went through this, I don't know, we can call it a telenovela or how it all played out. But then essentially, a lot of those VCs were backed by those loans that were through SVB. Now I think that a lot of those are going through like JP Morgan and everything else. So again, like there was a lot of transition that was happening. I think that now what you see is that there was a lot of companies that were ultimately caught. They got caught in the crossfire of like, okay, hey, like, if cost of capital is too high and if we're more selective and now we got to change our thesis a little bit. Now that the cost of capital is coming down and the thesis has already changed, well, the thesis is getting ready to change again, but it doesn't mean that we're going back to where it was before, say, for example, when the thesis first changed. Now the requirements and everything else are still very strong, or like hey, you still have to come forth. I think software is definitely going to be where it's at moving forward. I think that you're seeing a lot of M&A activity that's going to definitely heat up. So a lot of those companies that are like struggling to get funding and everything else, they're going to be faced with tough decisions. Either do we raise at a lower round or do we have to adjust our valuations because we may seem a little bit too valuation rich? I know that like companies like, think about it like this, a company like Stripe, before interest rates and inflation got ridiculous, Stripe was valued at $90 billion. It took a haircut of $40 billion as it pertains to valuation, I think, in order to raise a debt round. I think the silver lining that can give people just a slight hairline of solace is I think that also this might potentially force some companies to potentially go public. I know that there's like a lot of companies out there that don't want to go public because of the fact that there's no liquidity there for your early investors. And that's why a lot of folks really want to focus towards M&A activity. But I think the thing is for entrepreneurs is just to understand that the landscape itself has changed. The landscape and the requirements have changed, even though the cost of capital is now coming down. And you're probably seeing a lot of funds right now raise new funds right now. So in Q1, you're probably going to see a lot of those funds close in the sense of their new funding rounds. So some are raising like anywhere from 300 to roughly 5 billion, whatever it is. So that way they can start initiating their next set of rounds of capital and infusions of capital into startups. But the thing is like now it's just more so in the sense of people are going to have to really they're probably going to have to get their valuations under control. If I'm telling a founder, hey, one, get your valuations under control. So I know that your valuations were probably very lofty. In order to potentially raise that round, you're gonna have to bring your valuation down. So you're gonna have to give yourself a haircut. Two, essentially look at the requirements as it pertains to the folks in whom that you're looking to talk to. You can have a lot of VCs that are on your cap table that have very deep pockets. But, maybe possibly go down and sit down with those individuals and ask them, this is where we say, go ask for advice, understand, what does the landscape look like for them? What does it look like? What is it that they're seeing? And also ask them for their advice as it pertains to like, if we were to do another round, do you think that that's viable? And what would make it viable? And what are some of the red flags that make it unviable? It might just be that essentially that they're in a place where they're caught in a hard place. And we see this happen from time to time as the economics change, where we see that sometimes it's nothing wrong with the business. It has everything to do with the valuation as it pertains to like, if I'm an investor, is this too expensive for me versus what I'm seeing out there from the rest of the field? That's the part where I think that where we're kind of like trying to like go through that like filtration process of like understanding like, okay, hey, we got a lot of valuation rich companies. We have a lot of companies out here that are like, some of them just don't fit our thesis. So are they making any type of pivots? Some of these companies are very strong in what they do. Should they be looking at the M&A market? Should they be looking at the IPO market? It depends upon where they are and how much capital that they've raised and how many rounds and series that they've done. That brings its own set of nuances, as you and I both know. But I would strongly say that those are probably the main things. Now that cost of capital is going lower, you're going to see investors wanting to invest, and the investment's going to be plentiful. But the question is that the existing investments, do they fit the same mode and profile that investors are looking to invest at as it pertains to thesis and valuation? That's what it's really going to come down to, which I think 2025 is going to spark a massive amount of M&A activity.
Sure. Okay. And also, of course, we have a new administration coming in.
We do.
People have a lot of expectations and opinions about the business friendliness of the incoming administration, right? As opposed to...
The friendliness.
There's a lot of unknowns, I suppose. one other question, I guess, is kind of related to this. A lot of people are saying that the society has over-indexed on AI. The investment society or society in general probably has over-indexed on AI, especially LLMs.
Yes.
So, when does that come to roost, right?
I think we're close.
Are
I think that those chickens are coming close to coming home to roost. I tend to say that, and you and I both, like, if you've been in the industry long enough, you start to see like the phases.
Yeah.
You start to see the phases. And I think that we're at that phase where it's like people are starting to, like, you see the exhaustion in the conversations. I mean, of course, like, AI has been around in the conversation forever. So I think that like AI really became a really hot topic really around 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So think about from 2010 to here we are in 2024, getting ready to go into 25. It's been around for quite some time. And even before then, but I'm just saying, like, when AI became sexy, now it's just like you're starting to see like everybody's AI. And I think that, of course, you're going to have your pivotal ones, which are AI is the product. And then there's the other parts where AI is the feature. Okay, now that we've trained all these LLMs and everything else, now everybody is going to probably start sitting down and asking the question, now what? I think that that's where we're at now. Everybody's starting to have the question. They're starting to ask the question of, okay, we've trained all these LLMs. Okay, now what do we do with it? When do we start applying it? Like, when does it get this massive application as it pertains to, and like, when does it start spreading itself where the application can be spreaded without hallucinations and all these other types of, side effects that go with it? And I think that we're seeing that first phase of exhaustion, kind of like what we saw, like, if you need a good example, look at the crypto market. Crypto went through its phases, and every time when the phase ended, we had like this mental correction, and then it came back stronger. So it's like it started off with crypto mining. Nobody didn't understand crypto at that time except for the very like early stage folks that were involved. Then we had this correction in the sense that, okay, then we think that it's just too valuable. Now it's like after the mining phase, then we started looking at applications, aka your NFTs. In principle, they had great ideas, but most of them, let's say over 90% of them were probably just failures. Then we had a massive correction. Then we started thinking about it from the stance of like, okay, maybe it's not going to be in that use. Maybe we can start thinking about it from an infrastructural standpoint. And then now here we are in phase 3. The same thing can be said about AI. So like if we're taking the new age AI as it pertains to like large language models and everything else, everybody using OpenAI, Anthropic, or Perplexity, and whatever else there may be, we build this LLM where it's like you can chat based upon these specific subjects. Okay. Then it's like, okay, hey, well, how is it that we can use it from an infrastructure standpoint? Okay. Now we're like, okay, now that we trained it all, now that we trained these LLMs, now what? Because only companies that you really see that are really taking advantage of these things are enterprise-based companies that are literally dominating in places like the cloud or in data centers. Question is, okay, well, when does it touch Main Street and actually have its mainstay? Will it have that? And I think that in order for us to do that, we're going to have to go through that massive flush of like companies that are just non-essential. I'm not saying that they don't bring value, but essentially that the value has like, we kind of like outlasted, the party's over. And then essentially it's like, we need to start preparing for the next party. I think that we're there yet. I think that phase one is now coming to its end, and we're getting prepared for phase 2 as it pertains to the AI conversation.
Other than the big companies, so most of the AI companies are private, right? Mm-hmm. There's a few public companies, right? But most of them are private, right?
Yep.
So I'm wondering what would be the fallout? How will it be felt?
You and I experienced 1999. Yeah, we saw them in 1999 and 2000.
Yes, that was a very public fallout.
That was a very public fallout. But I mean, I think that we're going to probably see that same type of fallout. I think that in some cases, it's going to be quieter because of the fact that some people can get away with acquisition and some folks will just ultimately just fail. I think the vast majority will fail. You'll have a few that will ultimately that actually bring forth, real true value. That we can look across like, okay, hey, we can look across maybe 2 or 3 milestones and see like, okay, hey, this actually has some massive amount of staying power across industry. I think that they're either going to be acquired or they're going to probably be able to withstand avoiding acquisition and actually stepping forth and actually being some of the next gen leaders. I think that that's what we're going to see.
I mean, there's always some substance, right? In every kind of a bubble, there's always real muscle and real bone that's been created and that lasts.
But once it pops, though,
yeah, it's hard. It's a shock. what about the ripple effects? So when some of these players don't pan out, or their book value goes to zero if they fail, will there be cascading effects, or do you think that'll be manageable?
That's a very good question. And I think that you kind of hit it. Like, it depends upon what kind of economy are we sitting in.
Mm-hmm.
If we're sitting in an economy where it's very thriving, it's very it's very opportunistic,
Mm-hmm.
then it's not going to be Armageddon, and so to speak. We don't have to think about an Armageddon event, or as some people say, an extinction level event. I don't think that we have to worry about that. If the economy is at meh, or it's, taking a turn for the downside where things are truly starting to slow down, then yeah, it will get bad. It will definitely get bad. And then at that point, then essentially it's like, okay, you're probably going to see the few things that start to take place. They'll the beautiful thing about being an entrepreneur is, a lot of entrepreneurs should be able to land on their feet, because of the fact is, even if your company failed, you can always go to another company and say, okay, hey, well, this is the experience that I bring, because of the fact that, you try to push something out there, and, it's not always about like the failure in the sense that the company didn't work out. It just means that iteration just wasn't the successful one. I'll tell a story like Clubhouse. I think, people remember that platform, and it still exists today. But at its peak, during the pandemic, when Clubhouse finally made its success, that was iteration 18. Then they started raising exorbitant amounts of capital until their valuations started getting a little too high. And then the market started to turn because people started to go outside, and they didn't really have to be sitting there at home, like trying to be connected to the world. They could go out there and touch grass. And that put a huge challenge. And then, of course, alongside with that, they didn't take the acquisition offers. And then it's like, okay, you started seeing platforms like Twitter, now LinkedIn, and many other platforms literally start bringing that same feature. So then it really makes you look at Clubhouse like, okay, hey, well, where are they now?
Right. I was a user.
Yeah, I was too. Then it got a little bit too much for me. And so I was just like, I got to take a step back.
Makes sense. I mean, one of the, I guess, as far as the health of the economy, one of the things that we're all aware of is that commercial real estate it's kind of an ongoing virus, if you want to call it, like a mild influenza that's kind of has
it's the cough that just won't go away.
Exactly. It's long COVID, right? It's long COVID, basically. And so I think any further shocks, whether it's AI bubble bursting, et cetera, right? The system has this one weakness it's already dealing with. And that one is a long one, right? You're talking about multiple years, maybe even going into 2030s, because some of the loans and
it's the loans, the landlords, and the interest rates. And then on top of that, I'll take downtown Seattle, for example. Downtown Seattle commercial property is going through a winter has come. You've seen real estate that was at a premium of, let's say, $300 per square foot, now at $30. Class A. I think I talked to you about this a while back. There was a building in downtown Seattle, Class A, 75 units, commercial real estate, that just got acquired for, I think it was like $5 million. Wow. In downtown Seattle. And I think the thing is for the viewers, so that way they understand the differentiation between Class A, Class B, Class C. So Class A is like the downtown prime real estate that you see, a lot of the corporate buildings that you see, like those fancy glass buildings. Class B is okay, you can kind of look at it like a co-working spaces. Some of those are like Class B spaces. And then Class C is when it's outside of the downtown proper area, where it's it's very affordable, very cheap.
Yeah, the chiropractor, the dentist.
Exactly. That's Class C. Class B would be considered like the WeWork spaces. Class A would be considered like your corporate office spaces.
Yeah.
And the problem is that a lot of corporations are trying to bring their employees back to work. But after this hybrid model, the entire landscape has changed, though that we'll probably see things change a little bit in 2025. But again, it's a ripple effect of what we've seen in San Francisco, and now it's making its way across the United States. I think we're just waiting for the long COVID symptoms to literally subside. We're just waiting for the ginger to kick in or something.
So traditionally in the financial district, almost by definition, it was the banks that would have the office there, right? Or stock brokerages and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think Smith Tower, which is iconic Class A, I guess, I believe you can get space there for well under 20 annual.
Well, here's the funny thing. Do you know what? Like, that's been years in the making. So I have a funny story to that.
What it's doing is that it's creating affordability for many, many businesses who could never dream of having a downtown office, right? Unfortunately, we don't have enough of those dreaming about having a downtown office right now, right?
No.
But there will be. There will be businesses that'll come and be there. And so what will happen is that the nature of that entire community will be different a few more years from now.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it'll be more creative people that'll congregate downtown because it's more affordable.
I think so.
The rents will be even cheaper than suburban Class B. Those areas are actually desirable because if I'm doing hybrid, I'm happy to drive there once or twice or 3 times a week as opposed to going to downtown. So I think it'll be a fairly disruptive transition, but we may end up with potentially a more interesting community downtown than we had before.
I agree. I agree with that 100%. Remember when I said in 2007, when I said that so that was our first office. That was the office space where we were at.
Oh, Smith Tower?
Smith Tower.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We were on the 26th floor. The people there, lovely. The elevator operators, you get to know them. They're amazing people. It's an amazing building. Like if you've ever get the chance,
I can see the shine from 1 block away, you know?
Right.
It has so much brass.
The crazy part about it is the wood grain that you see in the building is not real wood. It's actually steel. Like everything in that building is steel. Where they messed up, and this is where it's like they got greedy, where they had businesses like Disney, Microsoft, and all the major corporations in that building. And they were like, literally, they never wanted to leave. But then they started raising the rent because they wanted people to move out and they wanted to transition the Smith Tower into condos. And then that created this whole set of controversy. And Disney was like, you know what? Y'all playing too much. We're out. And then at one by one, and these are companies that had floors in the building, not just a floor, multiple floors. And they just said, we're out. Then it just sat there vacant for quite some time, especially after the financial crisis. So it was a lot going on. But one of the things that I'm looking at, and we're going to probably do this as like a never done before. Here's an idea. What commercial real estate should do is that they should have corporate office spacing and then also have corporate office housing in the same building and downtown area and make it a hybrid. So have housing, corporate offices, and then retail at the bottom. I think that would solve a massive problem because of the fact is one of the reasons why people hate driving to work is because of the fact that the commute. So in most places where you work, it's not just here in Seattle, but you look across the United States, people spend anywhere from 2 to 4 hours in their car just trying to get to work. Versus if you made it like in locations where you set up hub spots in those neighborhoods where people can either live or also be in walking distance to their work and also be in potential vicinity also with schools. I think that that's going to be the future. I think that that's the future of commercial real estate, and whoever jumps on that first, I think that they will be the winner. They will probably be the winner of the next generation. So I just put it out there for free.
We'll come back to this. Let's see who gets interested.
Let's clock it.
Yeah, there's going to be a set of changes, right? So, zoning, regulations, et cetera, right? That are going to be part of that. And obviously existing investors, banks, et cetera, will need to be part of that. But that's an interesting...
It's a great revenue. Like you don't have to really worry about revenue because you have corporate there. And then on top of that, you have housing. And both of those two are succinctly linked to each other as it pertains to one or the other. And that will also cause disruption for hotels because if I'm providing corporate housing, like let's say if I'm Microsoft and I have a building for office space, but then I also provide housing in that same building. If I have a person that's traveling in, if I'm Microsoft and I own like a portion of floors, I can literally just put that person in that office housing. And then when they need to have meetings, they can just come downstairs or go upstairs, depending on the layout, instead of them having to go to the hotel.
Very good. Yeah, we covered a lot of ground, I guess, on a lot of fronts, right? We started in one part and we've talked about many different things. I guess since we are kind of on this ambitious trajectory, let me ask you another ambitious question or introduce another ambitious topic, which we very briefly touched on earlier, but which is the new administration, the next 4 years, how best to prepare mentally.
I'll try to do my best across multiple different industries or multiple different sectors. And then I'll give my overall opinion of what is it I foresee between, let's say, over a 4-year period to 5-year period. So I definitely see that there's going to be strong opportunities for businesses moving forward. I think that you're going to see a lot of deregulation that's ultimately going to allow a lot of businesses to flourish, a lot of deals to happen. in the interim, the short term. I think, tax wise, I think that we're going to probably see some of the same activity that we saw last time. Ultimately, when I look at startup community, I think that now that we're going to see that, well, the Fed operates, completely independent of everything else. And I think that they're still going to continue to keep cutting rates, which is ultimately good. And then, of course, if the administration is doing what they're doing, then, it's going to be kind of like this even flow, especially as we balance out inflation. I think that ultimately it's going to spur a lot of also entrepreneurship because of the fact that there's going to be a lot of red tape that may potentially be lifted, might be, but at the same token, government funding in specific areas will be cut, which will open up doors for private industry. And one of the things I'm really hearing from a lot of my friends is the conversation around education, which really spooks a lot of folks. After the initial shock, I think that the next thing that it's going to do is also open up opportunity for folks that are educational entrepreneurs, literally try to provide innovation to the industry. I think it's going to really matter as it pertains to what state you live in, as it pertains to who's positioned best in what. I think tech is still going to dominate across all sectors. I think finance will also dominate. I think that also industrial is due for its boom. And then, of course, software companies. I think that software companies, it's time to have their moment in the sun. I think energy is kind of like a wait and see how that plays. But I'm saying from both private and publicly traded markets as it pertains to where the opportunities are. I think healthcare will definitely have to take a step back unless FDA regulations get lifted or whatever it may be. Now, looking at it from a standpoint of where is it that I see the challenges? I think that the party will go well until the third year. The party will go well in the first 2 years. I'll put it like that. And then depending on how things play out in that third year, then it's either going to be like, okay, well, we start to see inflation and other things start to rear its ugly head, or we'll probably have to kick the can down the road. I think that ultimately by the end of year 3, though, I think that our economy, I wouldn't say is in trouble, but I think that our economy will face some significant challenges. And I think that that's just due to things like investment. I think as it pertains to debt, I think it also pertains to once you make things easy money policy and everything else, it has its good times. But then at the same token, when the party starts getting a little old and long in the tooth, next thing you know, everybody starts looking towards the exit. And I think that that's going to be the part. And I think by year 3 of the presidency, I think that people will start looking for the exit, especially when they start seeing that the kitchen is getting too hot as it pertains to inflation. Yeah, economy slowing down because, you can only try to give the economy so many adrenaline shots that after a while it will get exhausted. And so I think that that's ultimately where we're headed. And some things are systemic where it's it doesn't matter who's in office. And I think that in some cases, even though it doesn't really matter as it pertains to we go through these cycles, I think the other part is some things can go a lot faster because of the fact that we just throw gasoline onto it and it just expedites everything. So I'm assuming that by year 3 of the Trump presidency, I think that ultimately that the economy will start to show significant cracks in it that we can't do anything about. We're just going to have to let the system itself flush. I mean, I know that that's kind of grim. I look at it like this. And every single time that we've had massive challenges to the economy, the American economy has always been very resilient. The business community has always been very resilient. I think that also with that being said, we've seen companies like Uber. Uber was created during the financial crisis. Netflix made its significant adjustment to streaming platform versus DVDs during the financial crisis. Do I believe that we will have another financial crisis? Commercial real estate doesn't get under control, then we could see some challenges there. Because now you're talking about major effects to GDP on state-by-state basis, and then that can also have impacts on, the country. I think tariffs, that's a major race towards inflation, because of course it's the American economy pays for it. I think that also if we're talking about as it pertains to workers, if we're talking about raising the cost and if we're talking about having things made in America, if it's made in America, then essentially it's going to cost more. And I think that those are the challenges that we have to really think about. Software-wise, tech industry-wise, I think that they're fine in the grand scheme of things, as long as liquidity doesn't dry up and ultimately people aren't afraid and they're sending out memos to their LPs hey, we're going to hold on to capital for the time being and just the wait and see. I think that outside of that, we'll be fine. But I think that if we're looking at across multiple different industries, if you're an investor in the stock market and all that other stuff, enjoy the party for the time being. It's the thing that you and I both have seen across time after time. All great things do come to an end, or they have a moment where they need to take a pause. So I think that the magical number is 3. Year 3. Let's see where we're at by year 3.
Kind of makes sense because I think there's a party and then there's a hangover, right? Basically. And so whatever policies there may be, if they're excessive, whether it's deregulation or overregulation, then they take some gestation period and then you have the after effect. So that makes sense. I would agree.
Somebody's got to pay the piper.
Exactly.
I know that I'm sorry to take the wind out of the thing. I'm very optimistic, though. I will say that. I'm very optimistic.
I think a lot of people share the view that the American people and the American system is long-term extremely resilient, right? It's the most flexible, most innovative, most capital efficient, in some ways still the most liberal system that exists in the world of any significant scale. That's kind of a solace for the long term, but the short terms might be bumpy, right?
It's going to get a little rocky.
Yeah, everything's macroeconomic, right? So even when everybody in the country is doing really well, if there's one person not doing really well and that happens to be you, then for you, it's 100% bad, right?
It's 100% bad.
Yeah.
It's like, what is the phrase? Like, it's a recession when things are like slowing down. It's a depression when you lose your job.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing to look at. And, I'm paying attention to is unemployment. I'm looking at unemployment, affordability. I'm looking at where is the investment dollars going. The number one thing to truly, truly watch is the commercial real estate market. Like I said, if that can't get up and going, you're taking massive dollars, like that's massive revenue that literally gets cut from cities, states. And where do those other dollars come from? Like where will they come from?
Well, lots of things we've covered. I think we started with entrepreneurship and just journey of life, but I think there's some patterns and themes around struggle and going out there and making things happen, grabbing the bull by the horns and fighting through problems and adversity and obstacles, and then creating opportunities. There's plenty of opportunities to be created. There are plenty of opportunities to be seized. The resources are available, right? Your crew, yourself are available. We are also available for mentorship, bouncing ideas. But this is fun. The season is upon us. I hope you and all your close ones are set up for great Thanksgiving. Food fountain, friends and family, as the saying goes, right?
Yes, sir. Likewise to you as well.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you for having me.